not rushing us to the next chapter. Just being present in a way that we might not even recognize until later. The book of Job is one of the most profound explorations of suffering in all of literature. Here's a man who loses everything: children, wealth, health, reputation. His friends come and try to explain why it happened. They have all sorts of theological theories about what Job must have done wrong to deserve such pain. But at the end of the story, God shows up and essentially tells the friends they were wrong. Their neat explanations miss the point entirely. And what does God say to Job himself? God doesn't answer Job's questions directly. Instead, God reveals God's own vastness. The message seems to be, you are standing in a mystery too large for you to comprehend, but you are standing in it with me. Answer: I would have chosen if I were writing the story. I would have given Job a clear explanation, a redemption arc, a lesson learned that wrapped everything up neatly. But real life rarely works that way. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the point isn't to understand everything. Maybe the point is to trust within what we don't understand. If you're watching this right now and you've been feeling distant from the divine, I want you to know that your feelings are valid, but they're not the whole story. The whole story is still being written. The chapter you're in right now is not the final chapter. And the author of your story is good, even when the current paragraph doesn't make sense. I also want to encourage you with this thought. Sometimes the distance we feel is actually an invitation to go deeper. When everything feels easy and comfortable, we rarely push past the surface of our spiritual lives. We show up for the rituals, we say the words, we go through the motions. But when the easy path gets blocked, we're forced to find a new route. We're pushed beyond the shallow waters, into depths we never would have explored otherwise. Some of the most spiritually alive people I know went through seasons of profound darkness. Seasons where everything they thought they knew about God had to be dismantled and rebuilt. Seasons where they questioned every assumption and wrestled with every doubt. And they came out the other side with a faith that was truly their own. Not something handed down to them. Not something they accepted because they were told to, but something forged in the fire of personal experience. That kind of faith is unshakable. That kind of faith can withstand storms. That would destroy a second-hand belief system. That kind of faith knows what it knows because it has been tested and proven true. So if you're in a testing season right now, take heart. This isn't the end of your story. This is the part of the story where the hero discovers what they're really made of. This is the wilderness before the promised land. This is the cross before the resurrection. And just as those who came before you made it through their wildernesses, you will make it through yours. Let me share something else that has helped me in seasons of spiritual dryness. Sometimes we need to give ourselves permission to simply be human. We put so much pressure on ourselves to have it all figured out, to never doubt, to always feel connected and inspired and full of faith. But that's not how being human works. Creatures trying to comprehend an infinite reality. Of course there will be gaps in our understanding. Of course there will be moments when we can't see clearly. Of course there will be seasons when we have to walk by faith rather than sight. The Apostle Paul wrote about seeing through a glass darkly. He acknowledged that our current perception is limited, partial, incomplete. One day, he said, we will see face to face. One day we will know fully, even as we are fully known. But that day is not today. Today we see through a glass darkly. Today we trust what we cannot fully see. Today we take the next step, even when we're not sure where the path leads. And that's okay. That's not a failure of faith. That's what faith actually looks like in real life. Been carrying a burden of shame or unworthiness? Maybe you've convinced yourself that the reason heaven seems distant is because you've done something to push it away. Maybe you look at your past and see all the ways you've fallen short, and you've concluded that you don't deserve closeness with the divine. I want to speak directly to that lie, because that's what it is, a lie. Your worth was not determined by your performance. Your worth was established at your creation. You were made in the image of the eternal, and that image cannot be erased by anything you've done or failed to do. Yes, there may be things in your past that you regret. Yes, there may be wounds you've caused or wounds you've received. Yes, there may be patterns you're still trying to break and mistakes you've repeated more times than you can count. But none of that changes who you are. Fundamentally, you are still someone worth loving. You are still someone worth pursuing. You are still someone worth waiting for. The story of the prodigal son is one of the most beautiful pictures of divine love in all of Scripture. Here's a young man who basically tells his father he wishes he were dead by asking for his inheritance early. He takes everything and squanders it in a far country. He ends up feeding pigs and wishing he could eat what they were eating. And then he comes to his senses and decides to go home, not as a son, but as a servant. He prepares a speech about how he's not worthy to be called a son anymore. But here's the part that always gets me. The father was watching. The father saw him while he was still a long way off. The father ran to him, not walked, ran. Could even finish his rehearsed speech. The father was putting a robe on his shoulders and a ring on his finger and calling for a celebration. That's the nature of divine love. It doesn't wait for you to get yourself cleaned up before it receives you. It doesn't make you crawl or grovel or prove yourself worthy. It sees you while you're still a long way off and runs to meet you where you are. If you've been feeling like you need to earn your way back to closeness with God, let me gently say that you're operating under the wrong assumption. You were never meant to earn it. It was always gift. It was always grace. And grace is still available to you right now, in this moment, exactly as you are. I want to talk about patience for a moment, because this is something that doesn't come naturally to most of us. Everything. Instant information, instant entertainment, instant gratification. When we want something, we want it now. And when we pray and don't see immediate results, we assume something has gone wrong. But the rhythms of the spiritual life are often slower than we would choose. Trees don't grow overnight. Character isn't built in a day. Some of the most valuable things in life require long seasons of development that can't be rushed. There's a beautiful verse in Ecclesiastes that talks about God making everything beautiful in its time. Not in our time, but in its time. Every seed has its own season. Every dream has its own gestation period. Every answer has its own appointed moment of arrival. And our job is not to rush the process, but to trust it. That's easier said than done, I know. Especially when you've been waiting for a long time. Especially when every day feels like an eternity. Especially when hope deferred has made your heart sick. But I want to encourage you to keep holding on. Not because I can promise you a specific outcome. I can't do that. I don't know the specifics of your situation or what God is doing in the unseen realm. But I can promise you that God is faithful. That's not a promise based on my understanding of your circumstances. That's a promise based on who God is. And God's faithfulness doesn't expire. It doesn't run out. It doesn't fail. Even when everything around you seems to be falling apart, there is one who holds all things together. And that one has not forgotten you. Let me speak for a moment to those of you who have been supporting this channel and this ministry. If you've been finding these messages helpful, if they've been speaking to something in your spirit that needed to be addressed, I just want to say thank you. Your presence here matters. Your engagement matters. When you take a moment to subscribe to the Angels Decode channel, when you share these messages with someone who might need to hear them, you become part of something larger than any of us could accomplish alone. You become a conduit of encouragement to people you may never meet. And that's a beautiful thing. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for walking this road together. Now let me continue with something that's been on my mind. I've been thinking a lot lately about the difference between loneliness and solitude. They can look the same from the outside. In both cases, you might be physically alone, but they're fundamentally different experiences. Loneliness is the painful awareness of disconnection. It's the feeling that you're cut off from others, that no one understands you, that you're drifting alone in a vast universe. Solitude, on the other hand, is something you choose. It's a sacred space where you intentionally withdraw from the noise of the world to encounter something deeper. Many of the great spiritual figures throughout history sought out solitude deliberately. Jesus went to the wilderness. Moses spent decades in the desert. Paul retreated to Arabia. They understood that there are things that can only be received in the quiet, away from the distractions and demands of everyday life. Now, I want to be careful here, because I don't want to minimize anyone's pain. If you're experiencing genuine loneliness, that's real, and it matters. And I don't want to simply rebrand your suffering as something positive. Want to offer a different perspective. What if the season of isolation you're currently experiencing could become a season of sacred solitude? What if, instead of fighting against the silence, you leaned into it? What if you allowed the quiet to become a space of encounter rather than a void of absence? This is not about pretending things are fine when they're not. This is about finding purpose and possibility in the season you're actually in, rather than wishing you were somewhere else. There's an old hymn that talks about going to the garden alone, while the dew is still on the roses, and meeting with the divine in that quiet space. The hymn says, "He walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own." That kind of intimate communion is not reserved for spiritual superstars. It's available to anyone who will take the time to get quiet and listen. Maybe that's what this season is about for you. Maybe the enforced silence is actually an invitation to an encounter you wouldn't have made time for otherwise. Maybe the very thing that feels like abandonment is actually the doorway to a deeper connection than you've ever known. I can't tell you for certain what God is doing in your specific situation. That's between you and the one who knows you better than you know yourself. But I can tell you that nothing in the economy of God is ever wasted. Not your pain, not your waiting, not your tears, not your questions. All of it is being woven into something larger than you can see from your current vantage point. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day, you will look back and see the pattern. You will understand how the dark threads were essential to the beauty of the whole tapestry. You will be able to say, like Joseph said to his brothers, "What was meant for harm, God used for good." That's the promise. Not that life will be easy, not that you'll never face difficulty, but that nothing is wasted, that meaning can be found even in the most meaningless seeming circumstances, that redemption is always possible because that's simply who God is. Let me close with this thought. Wherever you are right now, whatever you're facing, whatever questions are keeping you up at night, you are not alone. I don't say that as a platitude. I say it as a conviction born from experience. There is a love that surrounds you, even when you can't feel it. There is a presence that accompanies you, even through the darkest valleys. Your life, even when you can't see the next step. And there is a future waiting for you that is brighter than your present circumstances would suggest. I know you're tired. I know the road has been long. I know you've wondered more than once if you should just give up. But please, don't. Please keep going. Please keep believing. Please keep showing up for your life even when it's hard. Because you matter. Because your story matters. Because the world needs whatever unique gift you were put here to bring. And that gift can only come through you. No one else can offer what you have to offer. No one else can walk the path you were meant to walk. No one else can become who you were created to be. So please take a deep breath, release the tension in your body, shoulders. Let go of the need to have everything figured out right now. And simply trust. Trust that you are held. Trust that you are guided. Trust that even when heaven seems silent, the love has not diminished 1 degree. The love is as strong and as present as it ever was. It's just expressing itself in a different form right now. A form that trusts you. A form that believes in you. A form that is willing to wait while you discover for yourself what you're truly capable of. And when you emerge from this season, and you will emerge, you will be stronger than you knew you could be. You will have a story that can encourage others who are going through what you've been through. You will have a faith that was tested in the fire and came out refined like gold. So hold on, beloved. The morning is coming. The dawn is approaching. And when the sun finally rises, you will see that you were never as far from home as you thought. You were always, always, always held in the palm of hands that will never let you go. I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful you chose to spend these moments with me. I'm grateful that we could share this space together, not as strangers, but as fellow travelers on this mysterious journey called life. If something in this message spoke to you today, I encourage you to save it. Come back to it when you need a reminder. Share it with someone else who might be struggling. Leave a word of encouragement in the comments for others who are also watching and waiting. Let this be a community of hope, not a collection of isolated individuals, but a family of faith walking together toward the. And, if you haven't yet, consider becoming part of the Angels Decode channel family. There's so much more we have to explore together. So many more conversations to have. So many more mysteries to wonder about. So many more encouragements to share. I'll be here, walking this road with you. And more importantly, the one who loves you perfectly will be there. Has always been there. Will always be there. Rest in that. Trust in that. And until we meet again, may you know in the depths of your being that you are loved. Completely. Unconditionally. Eternally. Loved. There's this quiet moment that happens late at night when the house is still and the world outside has gone to sleep. You're lying there with your eyes open, staring at the ceiling, and something in your chest feels heavy, but you can't quite name it. It's not sadness exactly, and it's not fear, but it sits somewhere between the two, like an uninvited guest that refuses to leave. And in that moment, you wonder if anyone truly sees you. Not the version of you that shows up for work, or answers texts, or smiles when it's expected, but the real you, the one who carries questions you've never spoken out loud, the one who sometimes feels like they're walking through life slightly out of step with everyone else. I want to talk to you today about something that has been sitting on my heart for a while now. It's about love, the kind that doesn't announce itself loudly or demand your attention. Attention. The kind that watches from a distance and waits. You see, I believe there are moments in our lives when heaven is closer than we realize, and yet it feels impossibly far away. Moments when the very forces of light that care for us most deeply seem to pull back, to step into the shadows, to let us walk alone. And I know how confusing that can be. I know how it can make you question everything you thought you believed. Because if love is real, if divine protection exists, if spiritual guardians truly watch over us, then why would they ever step away? Why would they allow the silence to stretch on for so long? I've asked this question myself more times than I can count. There were seasons in my life when I felt so completely abandoned by everything holy that I wondered if I had imagined it all. I wondered if the peace I once felt in prayer was just Something I created in my own mind to cope with a world that didn't make sense. And maybe you've been there too. Maybe you're there right now. Maybe you've been waiting for a sign, a breakthrough, a moment of clarity that keeps not coming. And the waiting has worn you down in ways you don't even talk about because you don't want to seem faithless or ungrateful. But here's what I've come to understand after years of walking this road and stumbling and getting back up again. Sometimes love steps back, not because it has abandoned you, but because it believes in you. I know that might sound strange at first. We've been taught that love shows up, that love fights for us, that love never leaves our side. And all of that is true. But there's another dimension of love that we don't always recognize because it doesn't look the way we expect it to. The love that trusts you enough to let you grow. The love that sees what you're capable of becoming and refuses to interfere with the process that will get you there. Think about a parent watching their child learn to walk. Every instinct in that parent wants to catch them before they fall, to hold their hands forever, to protect them from every stumble. But a wise parent knows that the child will never develop strength in their legs if they never bear their own weight. The muscles only grow through use. The balance only comes through practice. And so the parent steps back, not because they love their child less, but because they love them enough to let them become who they're meant to be. I believe something similar happens in the spiritual realm. There are seasons when heaven seems quiet, when the comfort you once felt in prayer has faded into something more like an echo. Silence. When you reach out in the dark and your hands find nothing to hold on to. And in those seasons, it can feel like you've been forgotten. But what if you haven't been forgotten at all? What if you've been trusted? There's a story in the scriptures about a man named Jacob who wrestled all night with a mysterious figure. The text says he wrestled until daybreak, and when the match was over, he walked away with a limp, but also with a new name. He was no longer just Jacob, the one who grasped at things. He became Israel, one who has struggled with God and with humans and has overcome. What strikes me about that story is that the blessing came through the struggle, not around it. Jacob didn't receive his new identity by sitting peacefully and waiting for it to be handed to him. He received it by engaging fully with the difficulty before him, by refusing to let go, even when it hurt, by staying in the fight when everything in him probably wanted to quit. And I wonder if that's where some of you are right now. You're in the middle of the wrestle. You're in the part of the story that doesn't make sense yet. You're in the darkness before the dawn, and you're starting to wonder if morning will ever come. Let me tell you something I wish someone had told me when I was in that place. The dawn always comes. Not on our schedule, not according to our plans, but it comes. And when it does, you will look back at this season and understand things you couldn't possibly understand while you were living through it. You'll see how the silence was shaping you. You'll recognize how the distance was teaching you to stand on your own 2 feet spiritually. You'll realize that you were never truly alone, even when every feeling in your body told you otherwise. Because here's the truth about divine presence that we don't always talk about in comfortable spaces. God's nearness isn't always measured by what we feel. There were prophets in Scripture who felt completely abandoned by the God they served. Elijah sat under a tree and asked to die because he thought he was the only one left who cared about righteousness. David wrote songs about his soul thirsting like a deer in a dry land where there was no water. Jeremiah accused God of deceiving him and making him a laughingstock. These weren't weak people with weak faith. These were giants of spiritual history who still experience seasons of profound darkness and divine silence. And if it happened to them, maybe there's no shame in it happening to you. Maybe the silence you're experiencing isn't evidence that something is wrong with your faith. Maybe it's evidence that you're being prepared for something you can't see yet. I've learned that some lessons can only be absorbed in the quiet. Some forms of strength can only develop in solitude. Some revelations only come when we stop expecting them and simply learn to be present with where we are. There's a verse in the Psalms that says, "Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning." I used to read that verse and focus on the morning part, because that's what I wanted. I wanted the joy, the breakthrough, the resolution. But lately I've been paying more attention to the night part of that verse, because the night has purpose too. The night is where seeds germinate beneath the soil. The night is where the body heals and restores itself. The night is where dreams are processed, integrated. The night isn't just something to survive until the morning comes. The night is doing something in us that the day cannot do. And maybe that's where you are right now, in a season of spiritual night where you can't see what's happening beneath the surface. But something is happening. I promise you, something is happening. The silence isn't empty. The waiting isn't wasted. Every tear you've cried has been collected and counted. Every prayer you've whispered into the darkness has been heard and held. I know it doesn't feel that way. I know feelings are loud and faith can be quiet. I know it's hard to trust what you can't see when what you can see seems so overwhelming. But feelings are not facts. Feelings are signals, not verdicts. They tell us something about our current state, but they don't define ultimate reality. And the ultimate reality is this: you are loved more than you could ever comprehend by a love that will not let you go. That love sometimes expresses itself through comfort and closeness and miraculous intervention. But sometimes it expresses itself through trust and space and the painful gift of letting you discover your own strength. I've counseled people over the years who were going through devastating seasons. Loss of loved ones, collapse of marriages, failures that felt like the end of everything they had worked for. And in those moments, no words seemed adequate. What do you say to someone whose world has fallen apart? What comfort can you offer when the comfort they really want is for the situation to simply not exist? I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is simply be present without trying to fix anything. To sit in the ashes with someone without rushing them toward resurrection. To let them feel what they feel without making them wrong for feeling it. And I believe God does something similar with us. There are seasons when divine love simply holds space for our grief, our confusion, our anger, our doubt, not trying to talk us out of it,